Mom, they're admitting me. Can you and Dad stay with Lily tonight? For 3 seconds, all I heard was the hum of the emergency room. Then my mother said, "Your sister and her husband are on a cruise. We're watching their kids." I stared at the clock above my hospital bed, 8:17 p.m. A doctor had just told me my appendix was inflamed badly enough that I needed surgery that night. But I wasn't thinking about the operating room. I was thinking about my 8-year-old daughter. Mom, Lily can't be alone overnight. I know that, Sarah. Then Dad can stay with Melissa's kids, and you can go to my house. Or bring them with you. I'll pay for whatever you need. She sighed. We already committed to Melissa. My sister was drinking cocktails somewhere in the Caribbean. I was wearing a hospital bracelet, signing surgical consent forms, and begging my own parents to make sure my disabled daughter wasn't left without care. Who exactly do you expect to stay with her while I'm in surgery? You'll figure something out, Mum said. You always do. Then she hung up. I called Dad immediately. He already knew. Your mother explained it, he said. Changing things now would upset the kids. Dad, Lily needs help transferring from her wheelchair. Her medication is at 9:30. Mrs. Alvarez has an overnight shift. I'm sorry, Sarah, we've already made plans. That was when I understood. They weren't unable to help. They were choosing not to. A nurse stepped beside my bed holding paperwork while I called everyone I trusted. My regular respite caregiver was out of town. Mrs. Alvarez agreed to stay later, but she couldn't stay all night. Then Lily video called me. Mom? Her face filled my screen. Is Grandma coming? I swallowed. Someone will be there, sweetheart. I texted Mom one last time. Please. This is not about me. Lily needs an adult there tonight. Read. No reply. 10:06 p.m. 10:41. 11:13. Nobody came. Then Mrs. Alvarez called. Sarah, someone just pulled into your driveway. My chest tightened. Is it my parents? She turned her phone toward the window. It wasn't their car. An old dark sedan sat beneath the porch light. I recognized it instantly. Grandpa Walter, 79 years old, driving across town close to midnight. And I had never called him. So how did Grandpa know, and why had he come himself? Grandpa Walter walked through my front door, carrying an overnight bag in one hand and his coat over the other arm. Mrs. Alvarez met him in the hallway. She takes her medication at 9:30, she said, and Sarah usually helps her transfer into bed. I know most of the routine, Grandpa said, but I want Sarah to confirm everything. Lily rolled into the hallway in her wheelchair. The second she saw him, her shoulders dropped. Great-grandpa? He smiled. Looks like you're stuck with me tonight. Lily gave him a small grin. You snore. So I've been falsely accused. For the first time all night, she laughed. Mrs. Alvarez called me from the kitchen, and Grandpa took the phone. Sarah? Grandpa, who called you? Mrs. Alvarez. I shut my eyes. Months earlier, I had given her his number as a backup emergency contact. I had never thought she would actually need it. You drove all the way over there? I drove 22 minutes. You shouldn't have had to. That isn't what I asked. His voice changed. Where are your parents? I hesitated. They're watching Melissa's kids. Is Melissa sick? No. Her husband? No. Then where are they? I stared at the hospital curtain in front of me. They're on a cruise. Grandpa went silent. In the background, I heard Lily say, "This wheel keeps catching." Then Grandpa answered her. Hold on, let me look. I heard the soft scrape of metal and Lily laughing when he muttered something about whoever designed wheelchairs needing to use one for a week. That laugh hit me harder than anything Mom had said. Grandpa came back on the phone. Sarah, has this happened before? What do you mean? Your mother deciding Melissa's needs come first. I almost defended her automatically. Then I stopped. I thought about the time I left work early because Melissa's babysitter cancelled. The weekend I spent at Mom's house after her minor surgery because Dad said he wasn't good with medical things. The family dinners where Lily's wheelchair was treated like a logistical problem. Whenever Melissa needed something, Mom called it an emergency. Whenever Lily needed accommodation, she called it complicated. I don't know, I said quietly. Maybe. Grandpa didn't argue. He asked something else. Has your mother ever talked to you about what should happen to Lily when she gets older? I frowned. Why? Answer me. I thought back. She mentioned a residential program once. Once? More than once. What else? I swallowed. She said, I can't build my whole life around one child. Grandpa said nothing. And Dad keeps asking, what happens when I can't manage anymore? The silence on his end felt different now. Not confused, familiar, like he had already heard something similar. Grandpa? Not tonight. What does that mean? It means you're about to have surgery, and I'm not adding another problem to your bed. I sat up slightly. You know something. I know enough to ask you for one thing. What? Screenshot every message between you and your mother from tonight. My stomach tightened. Why? Because tomorrow, I want everyone remembering tonight exactly as it happened. A nurse appeared beside me. Sarah, we're ready. My pulse jumped. Grandpa, go. What about Lily? He looked toward her. Then I heard him say, loudly enough for both of us to hear, your mum has one job tonight getting better. We've got everything else. I sent him the screenshots. Minutes later, they rolled me towards surgery. Back at my house, after Lily had taken her medication and fallen asleep, Grandpa sat alone at my kitchen table. He opened the family group chat. He did not call my parents. He did not ask permission. He typed one message, breakfast, Sarah's house, 9 a.m. Diane and Robert be here. Then he reached into his overnight bag. He pulled out a thick envelope with his attorney's letterhead across the top and placed it beside my hospital discharge folder. When I woke the next morning, my appendix was gone. My abdomen felt like someone had tied a knot inside it, and my mother's name was flashing across my phone. For one stupid second, I thought she was calling to ask if I was okay. I answered, Mum, what did you tell Grandpa? No hello. No how was surgery. I looked at the clock. Good morning to you too. Sarah, I'm serious. He sent some strange message demanding that we come to your house at 9. What did you say to him? I didn't call Grandpa. Then why is he involved? Because Mrs. Alvarez called him when nobody else showed up. Silence. Then Mum lowered her voice. You made us sound terrible. I stared at her name on the screen. I was in surgery, Mum. I wasn't available to manage your reputation. She hung up. 20 minutes later, Grandpa called. Since the hospital wasn't discharging me yet, the meeting he had demanded became a video call. Grandpa sat at my kitchen table with Lily beside him. Mom and Dad appeared from Melissa's house. Then another square appeared. Melissa. Behind her was a bright hotel room with sunlight pouring through balcony doors. She looked confused. Can somebody tell me what's going on? Grandpa didn't waste time. Diane, what time did Sarah call you last night? Mum stiffened. A little after 8. Did she tell you she needed emergency surgery? Yes. Did you know Lily couldn't safely stay alone? Mum hesitated. Yes. Were Melissa's children sick? No. Was Melissa stranded somewhere? Melissa frowned. Wait, why am I being dragged into this? Grandpa looked straight at the camera. Because your vacation was apparently more important than Sarah's emergency. What emergency? Melissa's face changed. I watched Mum glance toward Dad. Melissa leaned closer to her screen. Sarah, what happened? Appendicitis. I had surgery last night. What? Melissa looked at Mum. You knew. We were dealing with it. No, you weren't, I said. Melissa's confusion turned into disbelief. Mum, why didn't you call me? There was nothing you could do from a ship. Yes, there was. Mom shook her head. Melissa, no. I told you before we left that if anything happened, Jenna could take the kids overnight. The room went silent. I thought I had misheard her. Who's Jenna? Grandpa asked. Our regular babysitter, Melissa said. She specifically said she was available while we were gone. I looked at Mom. You had a babysitter? Mom immediately answered, that wasn't the arrangement. Melissa stared at her. What are you talking about? I left her number on the refrigerator. She turned toward me. Sarah, if Mum had called me, I would have paid Jenna myself. If that didn't work, we would have figured something else out. I didn't even know you were in the hospital. I felt something inside me go still. Until that moment, part of me had believed my parents had simply gotten trapped between two responsibilities and chosen the easier one. But they hadn't been trapped, they had an alternative. Grandpa turned to Dad. Robert, when did Melissa learn Sarah was hospitalized? Dad rubbed his forehead. This morning. From whom? Diane called her after your message. Melissa leaned back in her chair. You seriously kept this from me? Mom's voice sharpened. We promised to watch your children. We kept our promise. At Sarah's expense. Mum looked offended. Your sister is an adult. So am I. Grandpa raised one hand. Enough. Everyone stopped. He looked at Mum. Why did you refuse? Mum crossed her arms. Because Sarah expects people to drop everything whenever she has a problem. I stared at her. When was the last time I asked you to stay overnight with Lily? Mum opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I answered for her. Almost 2 years ago. Dad leaned toward the screen. This is ridiculous. You're turning one bad night into some kind of family trial. Grandpa's expression didn't move. One bad night can tell you a great deal about years of priorities. Mum suddenly looked past him. Her eyes narrowed. What's that? Grandpa followed her gaze. The attorney's envelope was still sitting on the kitchen table. Mum leaned closer to the camera. I watched the irritation leave her face. She recognized the letterhead. Dad, she said slowly. What is that? Grandpa rested one hand on the envelope. He didn't answer her. Instead, he looked toward my square on the screen. Sarah, yes? Your mother still hasn't answered my question. Then Grandpa turned back to Mom. His voice was quiet. Why did you want Sarah to handle last night alone? Mom stared at Grandpa through the screen. Then she finally said it. Because Sarah has become too dependent on everyone. I stopped breathing for a second. Dependent? Diane, Dad warned. But Mum kept going. She needs to understand that Lily is her responsibility, not the whole family's. Stop, Dad said. Too late. I stared at my mother, and suddenly years of comments rearranged themselves in my head. Have you considered a residential program for when Lily gets older? You can't build your entire life around one child. What happens when you can't manage anymore? I had always told myself those comments were clumsy concern. Now I wasn't so sure. Grandpa leaned forward. Were you trying to teach Sarah a lesson last night? Mom's jaw tightened. I'm saying there has to be a limit. That wasn't my question. She always figures things out. While waiting for emergency surgery, Mom looked away. Grandpa watched her for several seconds. Then his hand moved to the envelope. All right. He opened it. Mum immediately straightened. What are you doing? Something I should have discussed with all of you sooner. He removed several documents and placed them on the table. 3 months ago, I made some decisions. Mum's expression changed. What decisions? I frowned. Grandpa, what is this? He looked at me. For more than a year, I've been paying attention to how this family talks about Lily. Mum shook her head. Oh, Dad, please. I'm not finished. She stopped. Grandpa continued. I noticed who gets called difficult. I noticed whose needs are treated as inconvenience. And I noticed that whenever Sarah needs help because of Lily, the conversation eventually becomes about how Sarah should manage better. I shifted against my hospital pillow. Grandpa, so 3 months ago, I started reviewing my estate and long-term arrangements. Mum went completely still, he continued. I asked Diane several hypothetical questions. Mum's eyes narrowed. What questions? What would happen to Lily if Sarah became seriously ill? What would happen if Sarah couldn't work temporarily? What should happen to the house Sarah and Lily live in? I looked at Mum. She didn't look at me. Grandpa's voice hardened. I didn't like the answers. What did she say? I asked. Not now. Mum suddenly leaned toward the screen. Dad, whatever you're doing because of last night, this isn't because of last night. That stopped her. Grandpa tapped the documents. These were signed 3 months ago. I felt my stomach tighten for a reason that had nothing to do with surgery. He picked up his phone. I'm calling Elaine. Elaine Porter, Dad asked. Yes. Mum looked at him, their attorney. Grandpa placed the call on speaker. A woman answered moments later. Walter? Elaine, I have Sarah, Diane, and Robert with me. I'm authorizing you to discuss the documents we completed 3 months ago. There was a pause. Understood. Mum, cut in. What documents? Elaine answered calmly. Walter will decide how much context he wants discussed, but the documents themselves are already effective. Mum's face drained. I looked from her to Grandpa. Wait, effective? Yes, Elaine said. I shook my head. Grandpa, if you change something because you were worried about me, you don't need to punish Mum and Dad financially. Grandpa looked directly at me. I didn't make these decisions last night, Sarah. He let the words settle. You didn't even know they existed last night. That was true. Whatever was happening had begun long before my hospital call. Elaine shuffled papers on her end. The first document is the Walter Bennett Family Trust Amendment. Mum immediately spoke. Hold on. Nobody answered. She looked at Grandpa. I'm still successor trustee. Grandpa remained silent. Mum's voice became less certain. You told me I'd be responsible for managing the property when the time came. Lily rolled closer to Grandpa. She rested her hand on his arm. He looked down at her, then back toward the screen. Elaine turned a page. The amendment changes the successor trustee designation to Dad, you didn't. Yes, Grandpa said, I did. Mum went silent. Elaine continued. 3 months ago, Walter amended the trust. Diane is no longer the designated successor trustee. My mother stared at the screen. Then who is? Elaine answered. Sarah. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood. Me? Grandpa nodded. I pushed myself higher against the hospital pillows. Grandpa, I didn't ask for that. I know. Mum finally found her voice. You replaced me with Sarah. No, Grandpa said. I replaced an arrangement I no longer trusted. Because of one night, I signed those documents 3 months ago. That stopped her. Grandpa placed his hand over the papers. I've watched this family for more than a year, Diane. I've watched Sarah handle Lily's appointments, school, equipment, work, bills, and emergencies. And I've watched everyone praise her for being strong, right up until being strong becomes an excuse not to help her. Mom shook her head. That isn't fair. Neither was last night. Elaine continued explaining the amendment. The accessible house Lily and I lived in belonged to Grandpa. I rented it from him because its wider doorways, ramps, and modified bathroom worked for Lily. I had always assumed that after Grandpa died, the house would return to the general family estate. That was no longer true. The property is now held under the trust provisions Walter established, Elaine said. Sarah and Lily have protected long-term use of the home, with Sarah eventually controlling it through the trust. I covered my mouth. Grandpa looked at Lily beside him. I wanted one thing settled while I was still here to settle it. That child will not lose an accessible home because somebody decides her needs are inconvenient. Mom looked wounded. You think I would throw them out? I think you repeatedly suggested Lily should eventually be placed somewhere else. I froze. Mom looked down. So Grandpa had heard it too. He continued. That's why I started asking questions months ago. I asked what would happen if Sarah became seriously ill. I asked what you thought should happen to Lily if Sarah couldn't work for a while. Those were hypothetical conversations. Last night wasn't hypothetical. Nobody answered. Elaine explained that Grandpa had also removed Mum and Dad from authority over a separate family support account. They weren't being disinherited, but they would no longer control anything that could determine Lily's housing or financial security. Grandpa then looked at Mum. One question remains. Mum's shoulders stiffened. Were you trying to teach Sarah a lesson last night? Mum glanced at Dad. He looked away. Finally, she said, I thought Sarah needed to understand that she can't keep expecting the family to rearrange everything because of Lily. My throat tightened. So you chose the night I needed emergency surgery? Mum didn't answer. Look at me. Her eyes returned to the camera. You knew Mrs. Alvarez couldn't stay. You knew I was going into surgery. You knew Lily couldn't be alone. I knew you would find someone. That was the lesson? Mum exhaled. I thought if we kept stepping in, you'd never build other arrangements. Dad rubbed both hands over his face. I told her we should make sure someone was confirmed. I turned toward him. But you stayed. He lowered his hands. What? You disagreed, but you stayed at Melissa's house. Sarah, that means you still chose it. Dad's mouth closed. There was nothing left to explain. They had a babysitter available for Melissa's children. They had hidden my hospitalization from Melissa. Mum had deliberately refused because she wanted to force me to solve the problem alone. And Dad had known enough to question it, but had gone along because confronting Mom was less comfortable than leaving me to scramble from a hospital bed. I looked toward Grandpa's screen. Can Lily go with Mrs. Alvarez for a minute? Grandpa understood immediately. Mrs. Alvarez came into view. Come on, kiddo. Help me decide what we're having for breakfast. Pancakes, Lily announced. That was fast. They disappeared down the hallway. Only then did I look back at my parents. I need you both to understand something. Mum started, Sarah, I never intended. This isn't about what you intended. She stopped. You didn't just refuse me. You were willing to let Lily sit there wondering who was coming because you wanted to make a point to me. I would never hurt Lily. You knew she needed someone. Intent doesn't change what you chose. Melissa spoke from her hotel room. And don't use me as the excuse. Mum turned toward her square. Melissa, no. I never asked you to protect my vacation at Sarah's expense. If you had called me, I would have paid Jenna. If Jenna couldn't do it, I would have found another option. And if I had to come home, I would have come home. Mum looked surrounded now, but Grandpa didn't raise his voice. He simply gathered the documents. Mum noticed. Dad, we should discuss the trust again when everyone has calmed down. There's nothing to reconsider. You're angry. I was concerned 3 months ago. Last night confirmed why. Dad asked quietly, what happens to my role? You're no longer the secondary administrator. Dad nodded once. Mum stared at Grandpa. And the monthly help? Grandpa's expression remained calm. That ends too. Her eyes widened. For years, Grandpa had helped my parents with several discretionary expenses every month. I'm preserving my resources for my own care and the commitments I've already made through the trust, he said. No police, no courtroom, no dramatic lawsuit, just consequences. They had lost something more important than an argument. Grandpa no longer trusted them with authority. And neither did I. Grandpa, I said, I'm grateful. But I don't want what happened last night to become another version of somebody always rescuing me. He nodded. Good. After I was discharged, I followed through. With help from the hospital social worker and Lily's care coordinator, I rebuilt our emergency plan from the ground up. Mrs. Alvarez became my first local contact. A licensed respite caregiver became the second. Grandpa remained family backup, not the entire plan. Medication instructions, transfer information, and emergency numbers were organized and stored securely. Then I removed Mum and Dad from Lily's emergency contact list. That decision hurt, but it also meant they could never again use help as leverage. Melissa returned from her cruise 2 days early. She came straight to my house. I'm sorry, she said. You didn't know. I know. But I benefited from this for years without asking why. You were always the one expected to adjust. I appreciated that she didn't make excuses. I don't need you to feel guilty, I told her. I need things to be reciprocal. They will be. And over time, they were. Mum reacted differently. For weeks, she insisted Grandpa had taken my side. Every time I gave her the same answer. Grandpa made his decision before I even knew there was a decision to make. Eventually, I stopped arguing. Dad came alone one afternoon. I should have gone to Lily, he said. I waited. I knew leaving things uncertain was wrong. I just didn't want another fight with your mother. That choice still had a consequence. I know. He didn't ask me to speak to Grandpa. He didn't ask for his old role back. So I told him the truth. If you want trust again, I need to see it. I don't need promises. He nodded. And slowly, he started showing it. Mum took longer. I allowed her limited contact with Lily when I was comfortable, but she no longer had decision-making power over anything affecting us. Several weeks later, Grandpa came over for dinner. Lily sat at the accessible kitchen table doing homework while I finished cooking. I had recovered enough to return to work. Grandpa nodded toward the trust documents on my counter. You read everything? Twice. And? I looked at him. At first, I felt guilty. For what? For benefiting from your decision. He shook his head. I didn't choose you because you needed rescuing. I waited. I chose you because I watched what you did when nobody rescued you. Across the room, Lily groaned dramatically at a math problem. Grandpa smiled. That was when I finally understood what he had done. He wasn't trying to make me dependent on him. He was making sure Lily's future could never depend on people who had already shown they might not come. Months passed. I recovered completely. Lily stayed in the accessible home she loved. Our new emergency plan was tested once when I was unexpectedly delayed at work, and it worked exactly as intended. Melissa started showing up without waiting to be asked. Dad continued rebuilding trust through actions. Mum remained part of Lily's life only within the boundaries I set, and Grandpa went back to being what I wanted him to be. Grandpa. Not our emergency rescue plan. Lily never learned the cruelest details of that night. I refused to make her carry a betrayal that belonged to adults. Her memory of it was simple. Mum got sick, great-grandpa came, she was safe. My memory was different, because that night taught me something I would never forget. My parents thought refusing to show up would teach me who I could depend on. They were right, just not in the way they expected.